Hello beautiful bookish people, my name is Hannah and today I reread 3 books from high school that I hated.
Yep, that's me.
Those being Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, The Great Gatsby, and Heart of Darkness.
Why, you may ask?
Well, it was kind of an experiment to see if my opinions on books had changed so much that the original books that I despised actually bring something new to the table.
I thought it was pretty interesting.
So we're gonna go over each book and what I thought, if I changed my opinions, if they remained the same, what I got out of it, what I hated from it in high school, and all that jazz. So yeah, I'm ready to talk about some required reading. So the first one that I reread was Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, and this was one of my most disdained books in high school. I read it in, I think, my junior year of high school, and I just didn't understand it. I didn't get the point of it. If you don't know, Metamorphosis is about this guy named Gregor, and for reasons that we don't know, he just randomly turns into a giant beetle, and it's how his family reacts to him. And so when I was in high school, we didn't really talk about the meaning behind it or any of that stuff, so I gave it 1 star originally, mostly because I didn't get the point of it. But upon a reread and a little bit of research, you come to find out that Kafka and Gregor actually have a lot more in common than I thought. While as Gregor was the sole provider for his family, and he was overworked and underpaid and all this stuff, and he feels trapped in his own environment, and Kafka had a very similar experience. Kafka was not a traditional guy. He was very meek, and he wanted to be a writer even though his family said you have to get a job to support us. So there's a lot of similarities between the main character in Metamorphosis and Kafka, and I think that helps when you're reading it to understand that this is kind of an allegory for how Kafka felt. And I think when you know about that, it definitely helps your reading of Metamorphosis. But in high school we never talked about his back life. We just read the book with no context, and I think understanding where Kafka comes from and the inspiration for the story definitely can help your enjoyment of it, for me at least. Let's talk about the title, Metamorphosis. So Gregor starts off as a beetle. So when you think metamorphosis, it's the transition, turning one thing into another. So I was like, well, he didn't really go through metamorphosis, but I think what Kafka was more going for when he talks about metamorphosis is his family's reaction to Gregor, the main protagonist. In the beginning, you kind of see these 3 people viewing Gregor in a very different way, and how they kind of have different levels of sympathy towards Gregor. Like, his sister is the one who is taking care of Gregor. She's feeding him and nurturing him and making sure he's comfortable, and then towards the end you see she kind of grows to disdain Gregor for the position that he's put her in. And then the mother never stops looking at Gregor as her son, even though he's turned into this monstrous creature. And then the dad immediately turns on Gregor and thinks of him as just a bug that he can squash, and he shoos him away animalistically even though they think it's his son. And you can see the shift of the different people in his family. His sister starts as a young girl who just wants to play music for her life, and transitions into a grown woman, almost taking the position of what Gregor was, the leader of the household, and taking care of her family. So I think the transition that Metamorphosis is talking about is not with Gregor, but with his family members around him and how they react to Gregor. Let's talk about Kafka isms for just a little bit, because I think in high school they can kind of go over your head. Kafka talks about how you can kind of be manipulated by a system. This idea of bureaucracy kind of can manipulate you, and it's a system that's made for the elite. It's kind of this idea that you have to wait in a line to get in a line to fill out paperwork that you don't need. I think when you're in high school, you don't really understand how systems can be manipulated like that. I think now that, like, I've stood in a DMV line, I've had to call insurance companies, and you can really see how different systems can manipulate different situations, that you truly understand where Kafka is coming from. And now that, like, I have witnessed bureaucracy, I've been through jury duty, I think I can understand and approach Kafka in a better way. That being said, I gave it 3 stars this time around. I think it made a lot more sense to me. Kafka really benefits from waiting in a DMV line
And thinking, this is stupid.
So next I want to talk about The Great Gatsby, which was the next book that I reread for this video. And I mostly hated The Great Gatsby in high school
Because I didn't like any of the characters.
No one appealed to me, and it's this idea that nobody is likable in The Great Gatsby. And I don't know where my high school self thought, like, oh, you have to have likable characters for you to enjoy a story, because that's certainly not true. If you don't know what The Great Gatsby is about, it's told through the eyes of Nick Carraway. You get it? His cares are gone away. I see what you did there, Fitzgerald. And then he's next door neighbors to this guy called The Great Gatsby, and there's all these rumors circulating around who The Great Gatsby is and what does he do. Is he a bootlegger? Is he an Oxford man? Where does he come from? And Nick is distant cousins to Daisy Buchanan, who is our heroine of this story, and she is married to Tom Buchanan, arguably one of the most dislikable characters in literature. After Nick meets Jay Gatsby for the first time, you come to find out that Gatsby and Daisy had a summer fling 5 years ago, and Gatsby still loves her with all his heart and wants to win Daisy Buchanan back. And we kind of follow him as he tries to accomplish the American dream of having it all. This book is kind of considered the American classic, you know, the American dream, but it kind of is one of those stories that breaks down the American dream and takes it at its core. You know, Gatsby arguably has it all, and he's still craving this thing that he thinks will make him happy, which is Daisy. You know, this desire to, I want more and more until, because you're never satisfied. I think the American dream is to have enough money so that you can be careless, but in The Great Gatsby, Tom and Daisy are seen as those people who have enough money to be careless, but because of their carelessness, they're the antagonists because they don't care about anything. What is life without emotions and feelings and caring? Let's talk about symbolism for a hot second. This is kind of like symbolism 101. There's a lot of color analogy. You know, Gatsby's house is gold, his car is gold, his buttons are gold, all to symbolize, you know, wealth. And we have the famous green light, and traffic lights were actually coming up at the time, so it symbolized go for your dreams and go forth. But you kind of have this bay between them, so it's a green light that says come after me, and yet there's so many obstacles in front of him. And the Valley of Ashes is supposed to represent poverty, and there's just all these things that you have to consider. And I think
when I didn't have to take a test on it, I liked it a lot more.
And I just want to talk about one more thing before we move on. This is a very famous opener for a story, And it starts off the story. It says, "In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember all the people in the world haven't had the advantages you've had." Nick's father is kind of telling him, like, listen, you come from a good family, you've had advantages that some people haven't. You shouldn't judge because you don't know what you would do in other people's situations. That being said, I really appreciate it now that I have reread it. Alright, and the next one that I read was Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I read this my senior year and I
hated it. To my core, I hated it.
This was the one I knew I was going to struggle the most with, to the point where I almost didn't finish it because I was not enjoying it at all. And so this story is a story within a story, or if you're an English major, it's called a frame story. This is set in 1890 where people were manifesting to Africa to collect a lot of ivory. Why? Say it with me.
Colonialism. Oh.
Can you tell I've been watching Glee? So we start out this story, and this guy signs up to be a steamboat driver for the company. That's all it's called. It's just the company. He gets about halfway through the Congo and his ship breaks down, and he needs rivets.
Are you bored yet? I sure as heck know I was.
And he gets a new mission from the outpost leader and says, like, you need to rescue this guy Kurtz because he's really sick. And Kurtz is the most important outpost leader. He's the guy who is getting the most ivory out of the station and all that stuff. And then we have this fog come in all around the steamboat, and then we get attacked by the natives of the land. And come to find out, when Kurtz heard of someone trying to rescue him, he sent the people that worked for him to try to kill the people on the steamboat. He has gone, as you would call, mad.
So,
why didn't I like this, you may ask? Is during the time it challenged racist beliefs, but I would argue to today's standards it doesn't hold up well. It doesn't age well, because there's a scene where Marlowe, and he has a biscuit, and he sees these starving natives and he gives them a biscuit, but the way he describes the natives of the land is very much in an animalistic form, and they're dogs. He never says like white is a superior race or anything. He just very much dehumanizes the people he sees from the land. It's very much so hard to stomach at some point. Let's talk about the title for just a hot second. Heart of Darkness is a double meaning, a double entendre, if you will. The Heart of Darkness is, when you were a steamboat rider, meant the unmapped charted water. And it also, the double meaning of it is the hearts of man, and it talks about how if men weren't civilized, we would act as savages, like everyone you see around you. Society makes us civilized, and that's the only reason why we're civilized, is because of societal rules. Human nature is darker than you think it is. The one thing I will say is, my English teacher, Mrs. Chapman, is like, read this book when you're older, you will understand it more. And there was a passage that I will say that talked about death and how it is kind of a riddle, and I did really enjoy that. So I do think with a little more understanding of how life can work in that regards, you can divulge them a little more meaning from it. Does that mean you should suffer, 90 pages for those last 10 pages? I don't think it's worth it, personally. That is the 3 books that I reread that I hated in high school, with a little more perspective and a talking a little more about how I felt about them. It was kind of interesting to see how like your opinion can change from so drastically to something that is like kind of a new favorite. And you know, some things, they stay the same. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Keep reading and all that jazz. Do you care about the Great Gatsby? Oh, am I boring you? We'll wait for that noise to stop. From